Volkanovski, where do you put him, guys? Where do you put him? I was on Ariel's show earlier today. I got asked. Ariel told me, he said, Chael, I have Volkanovski as the greatest pound-for-pound fighter today. Do you have a problem with that? And I had a problem with the fact that Ariel thought he was taking a risk by calling Volk the greatest pound-for-pound fighter today. That was my problem. That's not a risk. That's glaringly obvious. And you can throw some other guys in there, right? You could bring in Islam. You could bring in Jon Jones. Like, you could do those things. But Volk is in the conversation, the very small conversation, for the greatest to have ever done it, for the greatest of all, not for the greatest of this time. They crowned him the greatest featherweight of all time a year or so ago. I can't remember the fight that he had where they came out and said that, hey, this is the greatest featherweight to have ever done. But then guys conceded that to him. Like Max gave it to him, and the great Jose Aldo came out and paid him that respect. And so we're just having a very different conversation. But let's try to break this down a little bit, okay? Because there was a few things that happened here. Volk has made it very clear that he wants to fight Islam. Made that very clear. And it was to the point that he didn't want to fight Rodriguez. He wanted to fight Islam. And they finally came to terms, right? They finally had made a deal and said, look, you fight your rear and you beat him. And Islam wins his next match. We'll do the rematch, right? The deal was made and the gauntlet was set. So Volk goes out and does his part, and it was dominant, right? It was absolutely dominant. Yair Rodriguez is such a threat. He is such a threat in so many different areas. And it was a big question of, can Yair keep the distance? Can Yair make this a kicking game? And there was several moments and high spots of that fight where they were at range and they were kicking, but Volk was kicking back and doing just fine. That was a big you got a former rugby player out of New Zealand who's training at a gym who in their title on the building outside says kickboxing. It's called City Kickboxing. And they're putting out the best MMA fighters that we've ever seen. It's a very interesting thing. So Volk gets his win. And when Volk got his win, right, for Volk, that was a unification. All right, I apologize. For the world and for marketing purposes, that was a unification of the interim championship and the undisputed championship. But for Volk, that was a number one contenders match. Volk had to do and win that match to get the match that he wanted at 155 pounds. Earlier that same day, Charles Oliveira does an interview and says he's not going, as reported and scheduled and planned, to fight Islam in October. And that right there was weird. This represents the third time that I can tell you. I don't follow Charles's career terribly closely. I could tell you off the top of my head this is now the third time that he has turned that fight down. So, he's like, somebody is trying to force him into doing something. This is his third time not wanting to do the fight. And I'll go through them right off the top of my head. His own coach came out and said he was offered it as soon as he got out of the ring with Islam, that they were going to pull and not do the Volk match. It's according to his own coach, and that Charles said no. Charles's own verified Twitter account put out a poster saying he was going to fight Conor McGregor. That was 2 weeks ago. Charles has now come out and done a media interview on Saturday and says, I'm not going to make this date, quit talking about it. So it would appear that now the door is open for Volkanovski, and it's a very weird spot. All right, let's back the timeline up. You got Volk versus Islam. Who did better? Who should get the nod? Who should get the awards? Right, we play this game a certain way. Who does that go to? It goes to Islam. That's who it goes to. But Islam is unemployed. Islam said no job. He's got no job scheduled. He's got a rumored job in October, but he's got nothing scheduled. Meanwhile, the guy that he beat got a match, got a main event, got $1 million or more, got a training camp, got to compete, got the press tour, got his license, got to America, got to Vegas, got his hand raised. That's the guy that Islam beat. Got all those things. Islam has no opponent. He has no date, he has no contract, he has no bout agreement. He is a rumored opponent who now has told the world for the third time he's not doing it. I believe him. I don't think he's doing it. So who is? Who is going to do it? I don't know. Topuria wants the match with Volk. Topuria versus Volk would look like the match to make at 45. If Volk is leaving 45 to 55, he needs to leave the belt behind. That's my opinion. But I'm going to push for that. He needs to do it for a couple of reasons. One, to let guys like Topuria get on with it. They already had that division weight. That's not right. And two, I think it's the reason he didn't beat Islam. Right? That fight was very close. But Volk, win or lose, was going to wake up world champion the next day. It's a very unique spot. And it's hard to feel that pressure, and it's hard to feel that drive. You've got to burn your boats to some degree. I think it was a mistake. And I don't think that he should make it twice. I think if he wants to go to 55, I wish him well. I'd love to see him up there. But I think he needs to leave the belt behind at 45. And as far as what's going on at 55, man, it's a really tough spot. It's a really tough spot. Islam himself deserves a match. But Islam himself has done nothing to get himself a match. You have Charles, who's now done 3 things to get out of a match. And you have Volk, who's talking about he's hurt and he owes Topuria one, but he says he wants the match. It's this interesting spot where I, for one, would like a little bit of clarity.